Hello everyone, I'm pleased to welcome all of you to our Maxis Business Spark event. We hope this series of events will help businesses in Malaysia, from corporates to enterprises, find new ways to embrace digital transformation and Industrial Revolution 4.0. Back in 2019, we kicked off our first Spark event with the Maxis Business Spark Summit. Delegates who attended this event received an in-depth look at the advancement of technology through engaging panel sessions, networking opportunities, and a smart solutions showcase. The overwhelming response was a testament to the shared mindset to accelerate digital transformation in Malaysia. Despite the pandemic in 2020, we were able to bring you the Spark Forums virtually through the power of technology. In these times, we have no doubt seen a shift in the way we approach life and business, and technology has remained a catalyst in our transition into the new normal. And this year, we continue with our momentum through virtual means, with the same objectives: to inspire businesses with insights and valuable experiences. Innovation has become even more relevant in these times. Businesses across almost every industry have been disrupted, not just by the global pandemic, but by digitalization itself. You will hear stories and insights on how organizations have embraced change, renewed capabilities for business resiliency, and how they are prioritizing innovation for future growth. I would like to thank our distinguished panel of speakers here with us today, who will share what it takes to innovate and empower the workforce to think outside the box in this unique environment, as well as new trends to stay competitive. As Malaysia's leading converged solutions provider, Maxis remains committed to bringing together the best technology to help people, businesses, and the nation to always be ahead in a changing world. Through strong collaboration and an innovative spirit, we believe we can accelerate digital transformation together, so that we can always be ahead, especially in the face of the most challenging times ahead of us. I have said this many times, and I will say it once again. Every breakthrough begins with a spark, and I hope today's session will ignite a spark in everyone tuning in. Once again, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Maxis Business Spark Engage 2021 Virtual Forum. I'm your host and moderator, Tamina Kausji, taking you through today's session on Innovate to Accelerate, coming to you from the Maxis studios in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. On the agenda for today, we start with our first panel session titled Fuel for Success, Innovation to Keep a Brand Ahead. We will then be joined by Kai-Han Krippendorf, who will deliver a keynote presentation. We then end with our final panel discussion titled Pushing Boundaries, Leading with Innovation, all with stellar speakers and industry leaders. The insights and up-close conversations with our experts sharing stories of keeping their brands ahead and lessons learned through the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and recovery are definitely not to be missed. Let's get started. Here's a swift overview of the speakers for our first panel. Joining me in the studios via virtual link for Maxis Business Spark Engage are Brian Liu, CEO of Lube Holding. We also have with us Pierre Pang, Group Executive Director of Mami Double Decker. And our panel is rounded off by Tai Kam Leong, Head of Brand and Marketing of Maxis. Hello everyone, how are you doing today?
Hi, thanks for having us.
All right.
Good afternoon.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Guys, so I want to kickstart the conversation by referring to some polling questions that we specifically asked all the SME folk tuning into our session today. And I've got the first question over here, which is, what is the key driver of innovation in your company? And I actually wanted to get Brian's thoughts on this. So the top answer that came out in the polls, almost 32% answered, the need to add value to customers was actually their key innovation driver. Brian, do you agree with this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that. I think the largest key driver for innovations is definitely the way of how we value add to our customer, right? I think today's world, everything shifted from customer experience to customer behavior, all the way to even technology adoptions. So what we have done over the past 1 year is really adopt some of the important technology move, like acceleration of digital initiative, like contactless order capability, online training, virtual model, or even starting our first bubble tea online store to cater, our customer who base out from home, stuck at home, looking out for something fun and entertaining during the MCO period. So I think value adds to consumer is very, very crucial in time like this. Thank you, Tamina.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Brian. Now from there, our second question that we asked our SMEs was, what's the biggest challenge when trying to innovate in your company? And I'd like to target this one towards Pierre. So almost 40%, 37.8, said that it was a lack of innovation strategy. Your thoughts on why this might be so, Pierre?
I think that at the start of it, we are all as humans are largely emotional, and we are always driven by fear. And I think the fear of the unknown or the fear of failure is always the core as to why we overthink innovation or we second guess innovation. So in our experience in the past when we started this journey, there's definitely a lot of fear. But I think that through our experience, what we can share is essentially that innovation should be done it shouldn't be done in a make or break situation. Innovation should be done in an agile manner where we are able to test hypotheses, learn from it, improve, and even with failures, take on the key learnings and move on forward with a better implementation of innovation step by step ahead. So what's key is to acknowledge that fear is not real, right? And the second part really it's innovating in bit parts and in an agile manner where we constantly learn from our mistakes and our success bit by bit to take it forward.
Absolutely. Staying nimble, not just through the past 12 months, but making it a habit. Fantastic point there. So I've got one last one, and I'll target this question towards Tai. Tai, the question is, how has technology helped accelerate innovation in your company? And those polled from SMEs, 32.85% said it was creating efficient ways of working that allowed more time for new projects. On the flip side, there's also the one that polled least, creating efficient knowledge hub with experts that can work remotely. Your take on this from your perspective?
So this is interesting to see that there are sort of three answers that are sort of close in scoring.
Yep.
I think it also reveals the sort of mindset of a lot of people when they think of technology. And while Pierre talked a bit about fear, right? I think technology gives a lot of people hope. But the challenge with this hope is that it doesn't, just like the word potential, right? It doesn't materialize to anything unless the implementation or the thinking behind it is strong. I will caution people in thinking that technology is this magical pill that you take and it solves all problems. It doesn't, right? Innovation still largely belongs in the bastion of the mind, in the hands of the people that run it. And technology can be this magic enabler, but at the end of the day, it really is about the people that are behind it. So technology can't be used alone. So while hope is great, I think real action and real proactivity is necessary. So to a point of whether does it bring efficiency or better insights and create value, all three answers are absolutely accurate. But I think the real key in how technology will help accelerate innovation is that it will enable the good people that you have to become great. I think that's the key.
Oh, very well put. And especially talking about the fact that it's not a silver bullet. You still need that innovation. So guys, now getting into the meat and bones of our discussion, I want to kickstart the session by first talking about the entire topic itself. Now, when we talk about innovation, how do you define it in the context of what you do in your industry? Brian, if I could start off with you, with everything that you do with Lube.
Yeah, so I think innovation is really the bread and butter for Lube, or especially F&B industry in time like this. So I think after a year when really everything shifted, as I mentioned, from customer experience, buying behavior, even technology adoptions, right? Technology especially has moved from the back to the front. So in our world, it's either you disrupt the industry or the industry will come back and disrupt yours. So I think over the years, past 1 year, I think a lot of F&B industry already feeling the effect of a lot of technology addition that came in to improve the efficiency of restaurant and also the restaurant's operator. So what we learned here is the most important about innovation is the spirit that distinguishes against the leader and the followers. So for us to continue keeping our market leader positions, we have to continue to innovate. That's what I see about innovation.
Yeah, I think you make some great points there about how you've got to evolve or else you'll just sort of get stuck, particularly over the pandemic. Pierre, coming from a slightly different perspective with more of a legacy brand with what you have at Mami Double Decker, what does innovation mean, especially in your industry for the past 12 months?
I think what's important to note is Mami is a 50-year-old company this year. And if we compare the needs of the consumers 50 years ago or 40 years ago versus today and looking forward tomorrow, it's important to note that the speed of change has tremendously sped up. So if you look into the last 50 years, with lack of innovation, there is still a lot of opportunity to grow because the speed of change and the demands of consumers were much at a slower pace in the past. But if you look at the consumer needs today, the millennial consumers, the Gen Z consumers that we serve today, their requirements are a lot, in a way, their requirements are a lot different from the past, in a way where they want to be excited, they want to have new things, they want a snack to be more than something that they taste in their mouth, but something that gives them a holistic experience. So innovation is important for us because it is a key to ensure we continue to keep relevance with our consumers, although we are a 50-year-old company. And it's something that is very important for us to constantly grow our business and to keep being alive, given how the speed of change is today as well as tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make some points there about the fact that it's still about the human experience that brands bring, and that's the value that they have. Tai, moving on from there into innovation, but in the telecommunications industry. What's that meant, especially in a time when everybody wants to digitalize? So how do you guys stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Tamina. But before I go down that path of that question, right, can I also say that clearly I'm going to have a fanboy moment for a moment, and I think there's a huge amount of admiration that I have for what Brian and Pierre does. So first of all, everyone's going to point out the obvious thing, right? They're fairly young fellas, right? We're all a fairly young bunch of guys.
It's the makeup, Tai.
Yeah, it is entirely.
Or is it the light from the white shirt? No worries.
Brian has the benefit of natural sunlight, you see, that's what. No, but I think, look, I mean, clearly, but more than just these two great personalities, right? The brands that they represent come from two very different angles. But yet, they sort of live the sort of innovation spirit on a day-to-day perspective. So clearly, what has got them at the start, what has got them famous at the start, whether it's bubble tea or whether it's you think about it as snacks or noodles, what they are doing today is really very different. If you look under the hood, or even if you see on the shelves, what they bring to the market is very, very diversified. And that is proof and testament that when they say innovation is about agility or is about customer behavior or customer changes or customer experience, it's not just them coming on a chat with us today and giving us just a lecture of any kind. They live that spirit, and I think that that sort of living that spirit is what we as a service provider, as a converged solutions provider, admire the most in the market, when we can meet business owners and brand leaders such as Brian and Pierre, and sort of then for us it's like-minded people, because I think that's when technology does its best job. Technology in itself can't really do much. It needs to be a win-win partnership. We need to find kindred spirits like the Mami brand and like the T-Life brand, and basically work together with them to try to see where their ambitions lie and what technology can do to enable those ambitions. Thus, hopefully, done right, helping them always be ahead. So I think that's sort of how we see technology being a part of the innovation value chain, and really not a thing upon itself, I guess.
Yeah, lovely. Really great way of putting it as a value chain. Now, jumping off from what points Ty made, Brian and Pierre, I want to go into you both sharing a little bit more about your differences in background and how that's actually impacted your style of innovation. Brian's side of things first, perhaps, coming from more of a startup sort of brand. Tell us how that actually impacts innovation for you.
So I think this is what we always share with everyone. T-Life is a unique brand because it was a brand that born under very difficult circumstances. Mm-hmm. So I think in 2017, I think we've been through a very tough turnaround time, which everyone know that, and to the point we nearly lost all our business. So I think we managed to break through the challenge and come out stronger than before. And breakthrough is really the spirit about the brand. So I think all this year, our idea of innovation work around the keyword breakthroughs. So I think the bare minimum consideration for any breakthrough idea is that it must be first in the category, it must be first in the industry, mm-hmm. It must be first in Malaysia, if not Asia. So I think some of the testament that we have rolled out over the years would be things like, first boba instant noodle in the world together with Mami, first boba ice cream with Boss ice cream in the country, first strawless reusable bubble tea cup in the world, which we own the proprietary of the topping tray. And also, I think in the most recent, we won the Gold Award for the DIY bubble tea kit for Asia E-commerce Award. E-commerce Award is the last thing that we ever mm-hmm. thought in our mind, or being an offline retailer, right?
Yeah.
So I think when we got a Gold Award for Asia E-commerce Award, it was a huge recognition for what we managed to pivot through from in time like this.
Yeah, what I'm hearing a lot of, Brian, is actually innovating and sort of predicting what the market wants before the market may even know that, hey, we want boba with our Mami. Speaking of Mami, Pierre, so how does your background actually impact your style of innovation with more of a legacy brand, which nonetheless has expanded so much that now you've got 500, 600 products going across 80 countries?
Yeah. It's interesting to note that essentially I come from the third generation of the business. I didn't have the opportunity to actually start the business like Brian. So on that level, there's a lot of admiration for what founders do. Founders like Brian, or founders like my dad, who together with my grandfather, who started this business. So we're always grateful that there was a foundation that's already built for us. And our goal right now is to take this to the next level as consumer needs have changed. So for me, my background, I studied advertising. I have a huge passion in advertising, and that allowed for me to have to view things in a consumer lens, which was important, to have empathy for consumer needs, as well as to be able to communicate in a way that consumer are able to be passionate about brands. And the other part really is also on the having some experience on the tech side of things, where I studied also on information systems in uni. So what's important, I feel, is essentially looking at innovation, not necessarily in terms of just marketing or product development. I think great innovation comes when different perspectives come into a commonality in terms of solving a problem. So if we look at great innovators like Elon Musk, for example, all right, is bringing technology experience into play, bringing car manufacturing experience, bringing various other experiences in even space technology into it, and from the different lens, able to create innovation better than others who perhaps look at it in a very silo lens, right? So I think that different perspectives are important for innovation, not only purely on marketing. And the other part of it is also it helps that over my whole life is sitting around the dinner table with my grandfather, my uncle, my dad, talking about the business, and the passion seeps through from an early age. So that's an advantage for me. So it's fairly natural to have that innovation blood in me, given the many entrepreneurs that I hang around with on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. We are who we spend the most amount of time with, right? So from there, gentlemen, moving on and into talking about passion and innovation as company DNA, as well as the fact that there have been plenty of breakthrough initiatives with regards to technology and innovations for SMEs over the last 12 months, but initially they were there for survival. In your companies, especially speaking to Brian and Pierre, what things that came in as a survival mechanism actually down the road, you've noticed that they are leading to you thriving? Brian, if I could start with you.
Yeah, I think, context, right? As I mentioned, we are always a brick and mortar offline retailer. So I think what the opportunity has opened up the new door for us for the past pandemic period is we have never imagined that we have opportunity to stretch the product beyond just a normal retailer or even a bubble tea drinks, right? We managed to roll out the products in the various FMCG model and having to have a great opportunity to come together with Mummy and Pierre to create the world's first boba instant noodle is definitely one exciting one for us. I think this controversial collaboration do stir a lot of talk of town, if Pierre can agree. During the early launch, and definitely we know is one of the craziest innovation that keep our customer well entertained while stuck at home during the MCO period. So I think another one that really worth noting is the Wall's co-branded boba ice cream that we launched on the second month of MCO, first MCO period. It's also one of the most successful FMCG partnership that, in historical that we ever do. So it used to start off with just a very simple LTO, limited time offer. It became a permanent item for Wall's ice cream. So I think in between, we also realized that we managed to score the fastest growing SKU in the category, achieving about 3.2% of market share in the overall ice cream category. For a bubble tea player to realize that they could get some market share in ice cream is out of the world for us. And I think one of the remarkable milestones is we also became the number 2 SKU sold in ice cream category in key retailer like 7-Eleven. So I think those are the significant that we learned throughout our 1 year period, right? It's the very first time that we realized how powerful is the Tea Life brand equity in the market that allows us to really extend our product beyond various form of product, a part of our typical bubble tea core concoction. So I think that is the significance that we learned that we doesn't need to stop being a retailer. We can move our brand, we can move into manufacturer, being co-branded with all the international FMCG guys, or even in the future, we could have launched our own self-branded FMCG product as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Brian. I'm actually loving the technicality that's going behind all our SMEs being able to hear from you firsthand, what looks like, oh, okay, this is the brand new product that's all the craze in the market, but you're telling us what it means behind the scenes. Pierre, same thing. Same question for you. What was initially survival for innovation for survival, but became something that's actually led to Mummy thriving a little bit more in the past 12 months?
Okay. I would like to add on a bit on what Brian mentioned,
Sure.
right? And give a lot of credit to Brian and team. Because the thing with innovation is a lot of the times people give excuse to themselves that, no, I can't innovate because I don't have the resources, I don't have the context, or I don't have the money to innovate, or I don't have the time to innovate, right? But at the end of the day, I think that a lot of it is excuse for ourselves because of fear, right? Why I give credit to Brian and team is because when we launched this weird concoction of milk tea instant noodle with boba toppings on top, obviously it is not something that would a 3-star Michelin, right? So, but what we realized essentially is in order to get attention of consumers, in order to innovate, you don't need money, right? drama could create attention. So in this instance, we were very clear that while this product is not the best tasting out there, but it is one that could get a lot of attention and drama for us to be able to launch subsequent products after this, right? So in traditional means, perhaps people may launch millions of dollars to get attention on a particular launch. Like I think we spend nearly nothing collectively, right? Very, very little, but essentially created a story for people to want to share, right? And that's one example of how innovation can be done in a very quick manner. I think we did from ideation all the way to execution was less than 6 months, and essentially using hype to create a demand as well as conversation rather than purely advertising spend the traditional way, for example.
Sorry, Pierre, but now you're talking about that part. I was very curious, and I thought I would just jump in because that's an interesting point. Do you think that fear that we have, right, will then end up, is that the reason why people always end up thinking that, oh, you know what, we need to make sure that we have this perfect solution first, we do this to be 100% right, and then because of that, innovation cycles become like 2 years long rather than 2 months long? Do you think that has an impact on time?
Yeah, I think that if we strive for perfection, at the end of the day, we would see our ideas being executed by someone else, for example, or tomorrow the trend, the trend today is very irrelevant tomorrow, right? So like I mentioned, the speed of change is so fast that we have to live in the now, we have to execute in the now, right? And how to do that with more impact, collaboration is another key factor. That is why when we identified bubble tea as a trend, immediately top of mind, we knew that we had to go with Tea-Life. So that's something that smoothen the process. You don't have to do it all yourself. We feel at Mami that in the future, part of our growth is going to come from us working with our competitors, right? Turning potential foes into basically business partners. We believe that it's not a zero-sum game, that essentially we win, others lose. You know, there is an opportunity where if we add enough value for our consumers with our competitors, everybody can win. One example, right? So that's our perspective.
Fantastic. I love the fact that you're talking about collaboration at the same time. I mean, after all, we are Asian, and using that rather than, individualism to build on things. From there, though, moving the conversation along, Ty, and this one's for you. Speaking of great ideas, speaking of innovation, walk me through the thought process of distilling ideas until you land on the one or the ones that you and your brand team will take on for development.
I'm gonna try and contextualize it to what Brian and Pierre both said, because we relate very strongly to both. I think the first is what Brian mentioned about setting this ambition in his own team on creating firsts. So everything should be, let's try and aim for first. Let's try and aim for like the only or the first. I kind of like that habit, because innovation is not a department, right? Innovation is not a function. It's not like only one guy. You are responsible for innovation. It's not that, right? Everybody has to live and breathe it, and then there's a chance it might happen. The second thing I want to ladder upon is what Pierre had said about the power of collaboration. I think the frenemy concept is not only because we want to make friends with other people or want to, or we want to have partnerships, but because increasingly it's very difficult to draw the line. You can't say Mami only operates in one category and Tea-Life only operates in another category. As Brian had said, suddenly he finds himself as an e-commerce player. Mami suddenly finds itself in the entertainment leisure business. The experiential center in Mont Kiara is a great inspiration. So, if you only operate with, you think yourself as competitors in categories you operate in, then you're not going to be able to survive. So in a weird sense, even though we come from a very different, or at least Maxis obviously has a very different history, the way we operate internally is we believe all our stakeholders we compete with and are our friends as well. So even internally, we don't treat each other as that's your job, that's my job. We always have this saying internally that, you have our individual accountabilities, but we have mutual responsibilities. So we see ourselves as responsible for more than we're accountable for. I think when we're all responsible for innovation, and we're all willing to use it as a habit, and we're willing to look outside as well as other stakeholders within our company to find sort of this whole win-win partnerships, I think that really helps us try to find these breakthroughs, as you guys have mentioned as well. But I do want to touch a bit on that point about technology, right?
Sure.
I think is the use of technology a must? And the answer is no. Sometimes we don't. But where technology becomes very useful is when we want to do what Pierre had mentioned earlier about, if we go out before we're perfect and we launch something first, technology will help us gauge very early whether we're on the right track. Unlike in the past, right? I mean, if whether we're 25 years old, mommy is nearly 50 years old. If we went out with a product in those days, it might be a case of like, a year later, you know whether your product is successful. That's after dumping a whole lot of money into it, a lot of effort, stocking all the shelves with our product, and then a year later, only realizing, oh no, you've lost a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
And time. But I think that's changed. Technology has become amazing. It's going to help us shortcut that very well.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Ty. Now, as we draw towards wrapping up this session, I want to take one round around this table and ask Brian first and foremost. So what's one thing that really stood out to you in this conversation for SMEs, for technology, for innovation that you hope all of the SMEs listening in to us today will take away?
So I think I completely resonate what Ty and PA say, right? The power of collaboration is really the true driver for innovation. Mm-hmm. So I think the most powerful collaborations or partnership in the world doesn't cost you a single cent, right? So I think that's where I value that, the power of collaborations is truly an initiative that can bring us where we are. We used to start very, very small. I think we at one point in time we came out to doesn't have any marketing budgets to drive our brand forward. Mm-hmm. So I think when we have the mindset of collaborating with other, to the sense of maybe a chance to collaborate with our competitors, I think that is the cheapest form of innovations that we can strive. And most of the time, we are the testament of where it could bring us in the future. So I think many times when we are young, we collaborate with small people. When we grow up to a certain size, we start to collaborate with bigger guys, right? So it's along that journey that brings us where we are today. So I truly embrace on that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brian. And Pierre, your top tips to the SMEs out there listening into us when it comes to innovation, when it comes to technology, and really seizing the day in this time.
Yep. I think technology, along the same lines of what I mentioned earlier, in regards to technology, I think it's the same thing, right? You don't need a whole lot of cash in order to incorporate technology into the business, right? Essentially, it's about the little things that make a difference. For example, today we have over 100 sales reps out there taking orders live through a notepad, where in the past it was a pen and a pencil. Yep. Information gets fed in live back into HQ, where our managers are able to immediately, through a BI system, look into areas of opportunities to then re-coach them live within the day as to what are some of the things to improve on and to optimize throughout the day. Those are examples of how sometimes we take technology for granted. Having the ability of a connection with a 4G line, with Maxis, of course, right? And essentially being able to run business in a very agile and very, in a way, efficient way, right? I think that's some things we take for granted. That technology is not about the millions of dollars that I have to spend in order to incorporate technology in my business. And the thing we learned about technology is also about the true value of technology for us. It's when technology tells us something we don't know, right? So we don't know what we know. So the thing with technology is fiddling with it, we will get into spaces where we never realize something is of an opportunity until technology presents itself to us. So for me, therefore, it's the two key takeaways would be, number one, don't wait for enough resources before you invest in technology. And the second thing really is technology is more powerful to get into the unknown, to discover the unknown that is turned into real opportunities for the business to thrive.
Fantastic. So really making tech work for you and your company. Ty, we'll end with you. What's your biggest takeaway from this discussion that we've been having?
I'm going to kick off by exactly what Pierre had said.
Sure.
Technology can do anything, but what do you want it to do? I think that is the difficult questions that business owners and SMEs have to ask themselves, right? What exactly do you want? The more specific you are about what you want it to be able to help you with, the more it can benefit, the technology can find its full potential, I think. That aside, I think if I have one last tip to give our fellow audience is simply this, right? Something that we live by here in Maxis Business is that we believe in the philosophy of serve, not sell. I think the reason why I look forward to meeting Brian and Pierre in person again is to be able to ask them what they are up to, what their aspirations are and what their ambitions are and what their goals are, and to try to see whether we can serve them with technology and with what services that we can provide. It's not really about what I have to sell to them. And it's a very boring conversation anyway to talk about things that I sell. And I think likewise, SMEs can think of it the same way. If the starting point is how they serve their customers and their users and the market at large, or serve the fellow collaborators that Brian had mentioned is such a fundamental part of business moving forward, then I think you're onto something. You're more likely to break through, and then you're on the path to enabling technology to really its full potential. So serve, not sell, I think is a philosophy that we both in Maxis, as well as everybody here, I think can take a page from.
Love it. Serve, not sell. Thank you, gentlemen. Brian, Pierre, Ty, it's been an absolute pleasure. Such an insightful discussion into the day-to-day workings of SMEs with regards to tech and innovation. Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mina.
All right. Thank you for still being with us, everyone. We now move from there into a keynote session by Kai-Han Krippendorf. Kai-Han is a strategy, growth, and transformation expert, keynote speaker, author consultant, and CEO of Outthinker. Kai-Han will be speaking on the apt topic of unlocking an innovative mindset in business leadership.
Hi, my name is Kai-Han Krippendorf, and I'm thrilled to get a chance to engage with you here at Maxis Spark. And we're going to talk about here is how do you spark great ideas? I'm going to lay out a process that I'm going to simplify into 3 steps that you can take and apply to your business, to your organization, to your career, to your community in order to spark what I call, and we'll explain this later, 4th option ideas. But let me first lay the foundation of this methodology. If we look at how great business innovators talk about how they think, they talk about outthinking their competition, not about outmuscling or outspending the competition. They do things that their competitors will choose not to do. Their innovation, their growth, their advantage comes from their minds. For example, Ray Kroc, founder of modern-day McDonald's, he said, my attitude was that competition can try to copy my style, but they can't read my mind, so I'll leave them a mile and a half behind. What he's talking about here is outthinking the competition. There are ideas that you will generate and you will implement that your competitors will be slow to copy. They all talk about creating this dynamic in the market against their competition. They all describe a certain strategic pattern, and I like they use different phrases for it. My favorite phrasing of what they are talking about is that of Gandhi. He said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. What is he saying here? He's saying we need to do things that our competitors, those who would copy us, those who would resist us, those who would fight us, instead of doing those things, instead, what do we want them to do? We want them to ignore us. We want them to laugh at us. Why do we want them to ignore and laugh at us? Because, well, then they're not going to resist us. They're not going to fight us. They're going to allow us to advance. And by the time they wake up and say, wait a second, that thing that you're doing is actually going to work, it's too late. We've already won. Today, I invite you to call this pattern that we're looking for as the 4th option. And what do I mean by a 4th option? What I mean by a 4th option is there is a point at which others stop thinking, when your competitors start repeating themselves, when they say, well, the way that you win is A, B, C, or I've solved this problem, what you need to do is 1, 2, 3. Now, it may be that the solutions that they have derived at are effective solutions, but it also means that they've stopped looking for new solutions. And that creates an opportunity for you as an innovator instead to look beyond the obvious and look for a fourth option. Let me give you a quick example of this. Ancient times in China, the way that wealthy people entertained themselves is they'd race horses. And there was one general who was frustrated because he kept losing to the prince. So he asked an advisor for help, and the advisor said, well, this is a pretty simple game. He studied some of the matches. He said, you basically race 3 sets of horses. You race your fastest, your medium, your slowest. The best 2 out of 3 win, as a result of which there are 3 ways to win this game. You either need better horses, you need better riders, or you need to provide better care and feeding. And your challenge, Mr. General, is that since you have less money, the prince beats you on all 3 counts. He can buy better horses, he can hire better riders, he can pay for better care and feeding. So you're going to lose if we play the way you played, but I see a fourth option. Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to challenge the prince to the last and final competition, right? We'll make this the one that determines the rivalry. Let's do it a week from Thursday. Let's invite your family and your friends, the whole town. Really lay the gauntlet down. Now, the general's a little nervous about this. There's a lot of social pressure here. But he trusts his advisor, so he invites the whole town. And a week from Thursday, I mean, this is like the world championship, the World Cup of horse racing. The town is empty. Everyone's in the stage, excited about the race, and they're talking about it, and the drums roll, and indicating the race is going to start, and everybody goes quiet. And then the prince prepares his best horses. They go up to the gate. They line up. The general prepares his best horses, and the advisor says, wait, if you play the way you've always played, we know what the outcome will be. To change the outcome, we need to change the way we play the game. I would like you to race your slowest horses first. And that changes the outcome. See, that's what we're looking for, is to do something unexpected that our competitors aren't able to respond quickly to. And that gives us an advantage. That's the source of all competitive advantages. Before 1968, there were 3 ways that people went over high bars. It was always a forward technique. And then Dick Fosbury famously goes over backwards. He wins the Olympics. It takes the competition 8 years to copy him. 8 years later, 90% of high jumpers are doing what's now called the Fosbury flop. Now, what you want to know about that case is that it's not that the rules changed in 1968. It's not that new technology was introduced in 1968. The technology that allowed that to be a way of going over was already introduced 15 years before. We were putting pads on the other side of high bars already a decade and a half before. So we got to ask ourselves, why didn't someone think to do this 4 years before, or 8 years before, or 12 years before? And what I propose to you is that there is technology that makes things possible. There are rules and regulations and possibilities that are available to us right now, but we're slow to adapt to those new possibilities because we don't have the concepts that tell us how to react or use those new possibilities. It's not that the concept is named. It's not till someone called it the Fosbury flop that you could call up a coach and say, hey, can you teach me the Fosbury flop? Could you go to a conference about the Fosbury flop? Could you find a book about the Fosbury flop? We're going to have to look at, if we want to create these fourth options, we're going to have to look at the concepts around what is strategically possible. Now, when is a good time to look for fourth options? I propose right now is the ideal time to look for fourth options, because when the rules change, the game changes, and it separates thinkers from outthinkers. Outthinkers adopt the new concepts and the new strategies. So let's take a quick look at this. So look at the average height of the last 5 NBA, National Basketball Association, basketball players, most valuable players. If we look over 5-year increments, what we can clearly see is they're getting taller and taller and taller from 1960 to 1980. And then suddenly the trend reverses. They start getting shorter and shorter and shorter. What changed? What changed was the 3-point shot. The rules changed, allowing you to get more points if you shoot from further away. Some teams adapted, some players adapted, others did not. And the rules are changing. We're entering this fast-paced VUCA world, and there are trends that are changing rules. Not just one 3-point shot, there are 20 3-point shots hitting us at the same time. We organize a peer group of chief strategy officers from large global corporations across many different sectors. And so we get to listen to them every week. We talk to them about what their strategic challenges are. And what we see repeatedly coming up are these trends that you are probably thinking about. And if you're not thinking about, you should be thinking about. Think of these as new rules. We have things like software as a service and everything as a service, digitally delivered. We call that telesas. Future organizational models. We have Be Good, which is the trend towards socially driven businesses. Ecosystem development and competing off of ecosystems. The nature of work is changing. We have distrust for many large brands. We have geopolitical retrenchment. We have autonomous connected devices and Internet of Things. We have growing proximity of value being driven ever closer to the point of demand. We have risks of cybersecurity. We have new digital platforms and digital mindsets that are required in order to operate in those platforms. And we have community and coordination. And what we have seen COVID do is simply accelerate these trends that have already been underway. And so what I'm proposing to you is that the rules are changing. And the question is, how do you want to play the new game? Do you want to be a thinker or an outthinker? Do you want to keep going over the high bar forward? Or do you want to learn to go over backward? What do you want to be? Do you want to be a thinker or an outthinker? Now, if you want to own the future, be part of the future, even be relevant in the future, you want to be an outthinker. We want to embrace these new concepts. And so I'm going to lay out for you 3 steps that you can take practically right now in order to start looking for and creating and finding and pursuing these 4th option ideas that will have you be an outthinker. Step 1 is to think beyond your product. Step 2 is to apply 5 strategic patterns to your ideation. And step 3 is to embrace crazy ideas. And I'm going to step through each one for you right now. So, thinking beyond your product. Let's talk a little bit about that here. If we look at Apple's revenue growth, what we see is that they really struggled to reach scale until about 2000, 2003, when something magic happened. Amazon figured out this trick that Apple took 30 years to find much earlier. If we look at Amazon's revenue growth, and we line them both up with year 0 being the point of founding, what we see is Amazon starts scaling much earlier. What is the trick? The trick is to not innovate in the obvious places, to look beyond your product and start innovating across many dimensions of your business model. So what I invite you to do is to think about your organization now and look through 8 different dimensions of your business model that you should consider in order to look for innovations. The first one is positioning, which is to say, who is our core customer? Who will that person be? What should our brand mean to them? You could innovate around product, of course. What new product, services, attributes do we need to change or adapt or introduce? Pricing strategy, how can we change our pricing model and change the basis of our pricing? Placement, what are new ways to distribute our product or service differently? What about promotion? How do we get customers or users through our funnel? That's marketing and sales innovation. We have process or operational innovation. What key processes must we run? How do we operate them? How can we change the way that we operate? Physical experience in spaces. How can we transform the customer experience, the customer journey? And then finally, people. I put people at the last, not because it's the least important, but because increasingly it's the most important. And the question is, who do we hire? How do we organize? What are our incentive structures? What are our cultural values? Each of these represent rich opportunities for you to look for innovations. And what you'll find is that in your company and in your industry, people have gotten lazy. They keep repeating the same P's. They keep looking in the same places for innovation. Every industry develops a set of habitual patterns in which they look for innovations in the same areas. And so the opportunity for you is to look beyond that and look across all of these P's and find a dimension on which to differentiate yourself that will really surprise your competition. Okay, once you've done that, the next step is to apply 5 strategic patterns. And let me just tell you a little bit about what I mean by strategic patterns. If we look at how great strategists think, we can learn a lot about studying great chess players. This is Alexander Kostanuik, When I interviewed her, was the reigning women's world chess champion. And what she'll do as a marketing stunt is challenge a whole town to play chess, and she'll line them up and just go around the room and then go around the room again each time she's seeing the winning move. And she's going to win all of these games. And how does she could look at the board and see the winning move? Well, research into expertise and expert performance says, very simply, it's because she recognizes more patterns. Master chess players recognize twice as many patterns as experts, and grandmasters recognize 10 times as many. Now, I work with a set of 36 patterns, and at the end of this session, I'm going to give you access, if you'd like it, to a full list of all 36. This is what my doctorate work was in. My first two books were translations of these 36. And what I do is I look at how companies that are really thriving today, you know, like the Tencents, the Alibabas, the Netflixes, the Amazons, what strategic patterns are they using? And what I found is that there are 5 emerging strategic patterns that you want to apply today. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go very quickly through each of these, and I invite you to generate some ideas, again, for your career, for your organization, for your community, for the world, and see what comes out of applying these patterns to your challenge. The first one is a very simple one. It's move early to the next battleground. It says basically skate to where the puck is going to be rather than where the puck is. And this is especially important today because cycle times are decreasing. The future is getting to us earlier, so we need to already be playing for tomorrow while we are scaling today. And this is the source of many great companies. A friend of mine in Bangladesh, Kamal Kadir, he is the creator of Bcash, and basically what he saw was that the P2P mobile-based payment systems that were popular in Africa at the time, but weren't yet here in Asia, that they should be adopted here in Asia. So he was in Bangladesh, he saw a man selling fish, and the man was trying to change cash for his customer. He said he shouldn't be using cash, he should be using a mobile P2P payment platform. So he basically designed that platform for Bangladesh, built not for a smartphone, but for a regular phone, customized for the local economy regulations. He partnered with a large NGO and created this, and it is now one of the largest payment platforms in Asia, Bcash. This is how great innovators think. I got a chance to interview Elon Musk, for example, soon after he launched SpaceX, and I asked him, what happened? You sold PayPal, you net $150 million for yourself, and you decided to invest all of that in building rocket ships. Why is that? And he said, I just think a future in which anyone can shoot stuff into space is more exciting than one in which only the government can. Now, that sounds like a risky premise, right, to bet your wealth on. So I asked him to explain that to me. He goes, well, if we think about the future, the exciting future of humanity is that we will become an interplanetary species. So you think about the future and you think, what is stopping us from achieving that future? And he said, well, one thing is that it costs too much to build and launch a rocket ship. Why is that? Well, because governments have a monopoly on that part of their space programs. In order for us to achieve the future, they're going to have to privatize that part of their space program. So let me, Elon Musk saying, let me build the perfect company that's tailored to take that off of their hands. He builds SpaceX. It becomes one of the first companies to take government contracts and has transformed space travel. So what we're looking for is that kind of simple thinking, is asking where is the next battleground and what could we do to move there early? So this is the question that I'd like you to ask, is where is the next battleground? What new customers, what new customer needs or technologies or regulation, and what could we do to move there earlier now? Second pattern, coordinate the uncoordinated. This plays on the fact that power increasingly comes from coordination. We're actually experiencing a paradigm shift from one in which power came from control to one in which power comes from coordination. Think about it this way. Why do birds fly in flocks? Why do fish swim in schools? Why do animals travel in herds? They create power and safety by coordinating themselves. This is a universal principle. And many of the business models that we admire today, these platform business models, whether that's Airbnb or Grab, they are not controlling things, they're coordinating them. I think blockchain is simply the next iteration of this. In blockchain, you're not only coordinating the ledgers, you're coordinating the nodes that are coordinating the ledgers. So in every industry, we see this coordination trend happening, whether it is IoT-enabled devices in your home, whether that is autonomous robots in manufacturing, whether that is farms that have devices and sensors that allow you to tell when you need to water a part of the farm, and then it activates an autonomous tractor that goes and waters it. In automotive, we see this idea as well of vehicle to everything. See, the issue with autonomous vehicles is they can't yet see around corners, but if every car has cameras and can see and can pass information off to each other, then we could actually practically create a 3D live map, right, where every car knows what is going on. And we see this in new organizational structures. Haier in China, for example, is famous for taking its hierarchical structure and breaking it down to 4,000 independent small companies, micro enterprises they call them, that operate autonomously within a certain set of rules. So the question here is, who or what would you like to coordinate? And just some thought starters, maybe customers, maybe data, maybe partners. Really take the lid off and ask, what is uncoordinated that if we could coordinate it, we could create power? That's the second pattern. The third pattern I call force a two-front battle. What do I mean by that? What we see is that successful companies today less often define themselves by their industry. They're defining themselves by something else that allows them to behave differently. You know, for example, I got a chance to speak to Howard Bihar. He was the president of Starbucks, kind of Howard Schultz's right-hand man. He was the head of Starbucks' international operations. And I asked him, what was your fourth option? And he said, well, there were many fourth options, but the main source of our advantages came from the realization that we are not in the coffee business serving people. We are in the people business serving coffee. So what does he mean by that? What he says is that their customers are not the person like you and I that go into the coffee shop to order the coffee. Their customers, who they need to focus on, are the people serving us the coffee, the people with the green aprons that are working behind the counter. And he says, as long as we focus on them and make them happy, they will make their customers happy, and customers will keep coming back. So thousands of decisions start getting aligned to this and differentiating them from their competition. It's not unlike Tony Hsieh, the CEO, the late CEO of Zappos. He said, we were going pretty well when we thought of ourselves as a shoe company, but when we really took off is when we realized we're not a shoe company, we're a customer service company that happens to sell shoes. So a powerful question to ask yourself is, what business are you really in? And what would that kind of company do? The next narrative is be good. And this is an important narrative because this is a trend that's been underway for a few decades, but I really believe that we are today experiencing a new level of realization of how this applies and how deeply this applies. You see, the old paradigm of business was that companies existed to maximize shareholder value. And as long as they focused on that, then everything would work out. You could kind of depict it this way. You got corporations that serve clients in order to create shareholder value, but increasingly companies are realizing that if they only focus on shareholder value, they create resistance to their growth and they diminish shareholder value. The way out of that is to create a situation where your growth is good for the world, for the community, for employees, for the government, for the country, for the environment, for the entire world, and thereby shareholders. Then you have the ultimate strategy because everybody wants you to win. What we're saying is not it's good to do good. What we're saying is even if you are purely profit-oriented and you take a long-term perspective, the smart thing to do is to be good. You no longer get to choose. You know, my wife's the general counsel at MasterCard, and she's more engaged at work than she's been for years, to a great extent because their CEO, Ajay Banga, has aligned them behind this idea that they are a force for good in the world. Now, that's not an advertising slogan. You don't know that slogan as a customer or as an end user, but you go to their offices, it says force for good. Now, what does he mean? He means that we're driving for a world beyond cash. Our business strategy is to convert cash transactions into digital transactions, capture our fair share of that, and that's how we'll grow, because still a huge portion of transactions in the world are still cash. But he says, but think about it, that's a better world. Why? Because a drug dealer is not going to sell drugs to your child in a world beyond cash and have that not be traceable. A world beyond cash creates accountability, transparency. It's a better world. So what we are driving for is a better future. It is kind of a profitable solution to a set of social problems. So I could give you tons of examples of this, but what I'd like you to look at is how can we rethink our business models and our purposes to align behind doing good. Some things you consider. What could you stop doing? That's bad. What can you start doing? That's good. How can you better communicate the good that you're doing? The MasterCard example, for example, is a good exemplar of that. If you want to dig deeper, what I'm seeing is that successful companies are digging deeper than this, though. It's not just about slogans and mission statements and foundations and big, hairy, audacious goals. They actually cut deeper and they actually align their business models to doing good. How do you get paid? And what kind of behavior does that compensation encourage? And changing your investor base. Do you have investors that are after pure profit, or are you attracting investors who are also after social good? So how can you create strategic power by being good? So the final pattern that we want to apply here is to create something out of nothing. And this is a great pattern. It plays on the fact that we tend to play the game of business following a rule that doesn't exist. In many games, the rules are you got to play with the players on the court. You can't add an extra player, right? There's 3 to 3. You can't add 4 to 3. You can't take a queen out of your back pocket and put it next to my king. But there are other types of games. For example, in Go, the rules are the opposite. In Go, you cannot move the pieces on the board. You can only add and remove them. So what if we played this way? What would you like to add to the game? Well, right here in Malaysia, we have Tony Fernandez. This is what he did, right? 2001, he quits his job. He buys AirAsia. It costs him 1 ringgit. Today, second largest discount airline in the world. What's his core idea? His core idea is we're not going to compete for airline customers. We are going to add new customers to the game, people that take railroads and other forms of transportation, and we're going to, across the APs, you can analyze the strategy across all the Ps that they designed a strategy that brought those new customers into the game. So a very powerful thing to do is to look at not competing for existing customers, but competing for new customers. And when you see customers that are not using your product or service, non-consumption, sometimes it's because they don't have enough money to afford it, but often it is that they don't understand how to access it, like they don't know how to book a ticket. They don't have access to it. The airport is too far away, or they don't have time. They've got a full-time job. They can't take the time off to go and buy a ticket, right? So you can look at those 4 barriers and see what can you do to unlock this non-consumption. Another great application of this is to create a category. This is what Gatorade did. For years, it was selling salty water on football fields, and Pepsi and Coke didn't see them growing because there was no category in their market share reports for sports drinks. So creating a new category, as Red Bull did as well. Both examples of companies that created new categories and remained dominant in those new categories. So the question is, what would you like to add to the game? What new types of customers, what new occasions, what new needs, what new categories would you like to add to the game? So what have we done? We've gone through 5 different patterns. Move early to next battleground, coordinate the uncoordinated, force it to front battle, be good, create something out of nothing. When you apply these, hopefully you've come up with some ideas. If you took time with your team to spend like 7 minutes on each of these, then what you'll see is you're going to generate lots and lots of ideas. Typically, this process generates somewhere between 40 and 200 ideas. Now, last step in the process. Remember, I said there were 3 steps. I said, number 1, think beyond your product. We got the 8 Ps. Number 2, apply 5 strategic patterns. We just went through those 5 patterns. The next is to embrace crazy ideas. And why is this important is because the 4th option will almost always look impossible. Let me explain to you exactly why. Remember, we're going to want our competitors to ignore and laugh at us. Why will they ignore and laugh at us? Because they won't think the idea will work. Now, why will they not think it's going to work? It's going to be inconsistent with what they already know. All knowledge have that kind of revolutionary pattern where someone introduces an idea that's inconsistent with prevailing belief, people discount that idea, then that person proves the idea, and then people change their beliefs. People don't like changing their beliefs. Now, the issue is if your competitors are going to ignore and laugh at it, you are going to ignore and laugh at it because you exist in the same belief structure. You adopt the same belief structures as others in your industry. So what we need to do is we need to take a tip from Albert Einstein, who said, it's not that I'm so smart, it's that I stay with problems longer. So what we're going to do is we're going to stay with the seemingly crazy idea a little bit longer. Very simple way to do this, just 3 steps, okay? The number one thing is you're going to take every idea and you're going to plot it on a 2x2 matrix. Here's a 2x2 matrix. Easy, difficult, high, or low impact. You'll end up with 4 different types of ideas. You're going to end up with wastes of time, difficult, low impact ideas, get rid of those. You're going to end up with tactics, easy, low impact ideas. You're going to end up with some winning moves. And now, when I first started doing this, I thought that that's where you would find your 4th options, but I have found instead that really the 4th option appears in the 4th project. It appears to be a crazy idea. Now, what do most companies do with crazy ideas? Well, they throw them out, of course, right? They're impossible. So what do great innovators do, what do innovative organizations do, is they work on those crazy ideas. They look at, could we partner to reduce time to market? Could we outsource to reduce costs? Could we figure out the technological barriers? In other words, how can we turn a crazy idea into a winning move? So it's absolutely critical that before you pick your 4th option, you work on a crazy idea and explore how you could possibly move it over. So let me summarize for you. What do we say? 3 steps. Number 1, think beyond your product. You've got 8 dimensions and that represent scenarios that you should be planning for. We've got 5 strategic patterns. Apply these 5 patterns. Ask, where's the next battleground? What could we coordinate? What business are we really in? How can we benefit society? What can we create out of nothing? And then embrace crazy ideas. Separate feasibility from impact. Discuss crazy ideas. And what is going to happen? Well, let's talk about what's going to happen. That's how you're going to introduce your 4th option. What will happen when you introduce that 4th option? Well, remember, you're going to put your slowest horses first. And your slowest horses are going to be so slow that the prince is going to beat all of your slow horses. And everyone's going to be laughing at you. This, by the way, is a pattern that is called it's one of 36 patterns, not one that we covered here today. I want to show you how you can access all 36 patterns if you'd like to. This is just a free resource for you. If you go to the website here or you use this QR code, it'll take you to a page where you can download all 36. This is also how you can connect with me. So the first heat, everyone's laughing at you, right? Your kids hide their heads in shame, your dad gets up and leave, everyone's laughing. But if you have the persistence to see it through, then you race your fastest horses next. And your fastest horses are just fast enough that they can beat the prince's medium horses. So it is 2-1. And then in the last heat, your medium horses, and the prince can't run his medium horses. He already run as fast as a medium. He has to run his slowest horses. Your medium horses are just fast enough that they can beat the prince's slowest horses. And for the first time ever, the general wins. That's what it's like to compete with a 4th option.
Thank you, Kai-Han. That was an excellent segue to our next mini panel session with corporate leaders. Now, building on the learnings from Kai-Han, allow me to introduce our corporate panel of stellar speakers. Joining me in the studios for the Maxis Business Spark Engage, we first have Dato' Sulaiman Mohamed Tahir, Group CEO with AmBank. Next, we're joined by Shairan Huzani Hussain, Managing Director with Shell Trading Malaysia. Finally, we have joining us Paul McManus, Chief Enterprise Business Officer with Maxis. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us today, where we will be discussing the topic of pushing boundaries and leading with innovation. Gentlemen, just to get the conversation started, I would actually like to bring out the polling results that we have been giving out to all our audiences from the corporate sector. So the first question, which I'd like to target towards Shairan, would be, what is the key driver of innovation in your company? Now, a whopping 38.70% actually said it was the need to add value to customers. Right.
I completely agree with the 38%, Amina. And the reason is my team humbly serve 10 million Malaysians every week. Therefore, we don't innovate just for the fun of it. It is to serve the needs of Malaysian consumers.
Well put indeed. Thank you for that, Shairan. From there, our second question, which I'd like to direct towards Dato' Sulaiman, we asked our audiences, what is the biggest challenge when trying to innovate in your company? And 31% almost answered that it was a lack of innovation strategy. Your thoughts on this, Dato'?
I agree with you. I agree with the audience in a sense because of the lack of innovation strategy. But really, at the end of the day, innovation strategy is about the environment that you create, for your organization. And I believe that a precursor to innovation is really about creating a lot of opportunities for people to debate and interact. Hence, the more opportunity that you give, the more you create this kind of atmosphere, the more innovative the organization can become. So I guess, yes, you're right, but just setting a strategy, it won't happen. Innovation is a process. Innovation is about everyday thinking about how can we better ourselves with the customers.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Dato'. And the last polling question that we have is actually this one. How has technology helped accelerate innovation in your company? The answer that came out tops, almost 38% answered, it provided valuable insights for quick decision-making and risk management. Paul, do you agree with this? Your thoughts?
Absolutely. I guess when you look to innovate, you base it on certain assumptions in terms of new experiences or interactions you want to create. But you need to substantiate it, and data in particular is a valuable source to allow you to validate your assumptions and then to test those assumptions in the market with your customers, whether it be products or services or experiences. But I also think that technology, particularly in the last 12 months, has forced us to collaborate and innovate in new ways, and has enabled us to do that, despite the fact that we can't always come together. We have to do it in virtual forums. So I think technology has absolutely helped accelerate innovation, but it's been an enabler, but substantiated by feedback and data.
All right, gentlemen, let's get straight into the discussion from there. Now, of course, we've got a fantastic, well-represented panel from the corporate sector with all three of you. And these are, of course, industries that have seen innovation to be the driving force, from financial services, the retail industry with Shell, and even telecoms. Tell us, does this get you even more excited at the start of each day, the thought of all this innovation that's to come? Dato' Sulaiman?
I mean, definitely, because technology really changed the way banking is being done. Still remember those days, physical brick and mortar coming to branches.
Oh, yes.
But today, I mean, expect the banks to be in their houses, at their fingertips. And technology today allows for the customers to do that. It comes into things first, the convenience to the customers, but it's also make it even more competitive for banks, because customers can easily switch, whether they want to be in one bank or another. And if the process is seamless and easy, it's just a matter of moving money around at your fingertips. Hence, continued innovation, working and engaging customers, I think is very important. And money is very dear to customers, and because it's dear to customers, it's also in a sense an advantage for banks by virtue that they want to work with someone that they can trust. And because of that, we have, that element, but it doesn't mean that, you can have it forever. Trust is a relationship. Trust is a verb. So unless you work on the trust and relationship, I don't think you can get traction on customers' belief. Hence, in the creation of technology, it's very important that we continue to remain robust. We continue to make sure that the data protection, the customers' confidence, I think is always there. But technology allows a lot of opportunities also for banks to work with customers, by virtue that technology helps banks to gather that data on customers, and data on customers today, I think, is the most important thing. It's not about knowing each individual customer's understanding customers' behavior, what their wants, what their needs, and that paves the way for us to be more innovative.
And all that on a daily basis as well. Thank you, Dr. Sulaiman. Shairan, I wanted to get your thoughts on the same. As you mentioned earlier, 10 million customers throughout Malaysia and innovation. What about that sparks some synergy on a daily basis?
So it is about that every single day. Of course, we have mundane things like making sure our fuels arrive on time, our bread are baked when customers want to go to work. The collaboration piece really come to the fore during the COVID-19 lockdown, where I suddenly realized, Termina, that I had a glimpse of 20 years into the future, where people don't necessarily use fuels to try to move around anymore, because at that time we didn't have people driving. So that forced me to figure out how to move our business 20 years ahead, and it has to happen there and then. So that's something really enabled by technology, such as now we deliver food, freshly baked pastries, hot coffee to our customers because we have the technology and collaboration partner, in this case, the food delivery business partners. Innovation, therefore.
Absolutely. 2 decades into the future, but happening right now. And Paul, if I could very quickly get your thoughts about innovation when it comes to the telco sector and what that's been like, especially in this last year.
I guess the challenges we've all faced in every walk of life over the last year has been absolutely unprecedented. And well, I guess there's a few things have come out of it. Technology can be a great enabler for organizations and people to do things in different ways. And certainly at the start of the year, we looked at a program called Kita Sapo Kita to take the collective learnings of everyone in the industry through their personal experience and how they're using technology to do things in different ways. And we believe that the collective can help do that. And that's the exciting thing about it. On the back of some of these challenges, we identified the pain points that customers were facing, and we launched new products that helped them address the issues they faced in an environment where their offices were now closed, that people were having to work from home, they were having to engage in new ways with their customers. So it's a really inspiring, albeit it's been a difficult time. I do feel digital adoption has accelerated quite significantly in the last 12 months from where it probably would have been under any other circumstance.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Paul. Now, gentlemen, of course, having an innovative mindset sounds simple enough if you have a blank canvas. But of course, when it comes to the corporate sector and industries where we do need to keep to certain boundaries, has this been a challenge to staying creative, and how is it overcome? Dr. Sulaiman, if I could get your thoughts on this for the banking sector.
I mean, certainly banking, I think, as you know, Tamina, it's a lot of regulations. We have many regulators that govern us. I suppose the whole idea of having the regulators to create that trust element so that people can be safe, thinking their deposits, with a bank that's kind of well governed. So I guess that's important to them. Hence, innovation, again, is not about innovation. Clearly, even being conscious about the safety of the deposits of our customers and the safety of the investments with us, I think creates innovation, of course, with understanding of what the customer's expectations and wants. And to me, regulation is something that, that you put to matter in the sense that the process that you need to undertake so that you're robust enough to be able to provide those services. Hence, yes, you can't have innovation without limits, by virtue that the innovation has to be remaining relevant to the customers. It can only be relevant if the customers trust you, right? And that trust is a function of the processes and the regulation that's been put in place. To us, I think we embrace that, by virtue that we know that this is a crux and fundamental for customers. I mean, you wouldn't want to place money with me if you're not comfortable, right? If you don't know my processes are good. But the fact that you have regulators, in place to check on that, then it makes you comfortable. And because of that, we need to protect that. Hence, the innovation that we do, we think about not so much about to beat the regulation, but to really create that trust with the customers. And it goes to the fact that, and how do you then do the customer journey, customer experience, and making information available, but not too available as to the public, but to the customer, be able then to advise the customer. Hence, that's what the customer expects. And because money is so sensitive, again, we also need very sensitive in the way that we approach an idea or a thought. And we went through many robust processes just to make sure that that a customer accepts it, or customer feel that that this is something that could jeopardize their position or their financial information and what have you. So we're very particular about it. But I always thought that it's a good thing, because that's the crux, the reason for me, for the banks to exist.
Absolutely, striking that right balance. Thanks, Dr. Sulaiman. From there, gentlemen, now many companies today want to make their mark and stamp that they are basically the first to do something. But at the same time, Sharon, I wanted to ask you, how important is it to find that unique space which really delivers customer value to improve experiences? And how do you do that?
So it's not always about being the first. Of course, it strokes one's ego if you are the first. But ultimately, it's about the customers. And I just struck by Dr. Sulaiman's word just now, trust. And by the way, Dr. Sulaiman, I would trust my little money with you any day.
Thank you.
Malaysia trusts the Shell brand when it comes to fuel's quality. And our fuel just take you so much more kilometer extra. And that's our bread and butter. And people rightfully take that for granted. But Demida, the future is different. The future is electric. Absolutely. And this is where innovation comes in play. And I'm so proud. At the moment, I have more than 100 Shell petrol stations in Malaysia.
Wow.
Runs off the grid, supplying green electricity to our EV cars. Way ahead of the curve, but we are here for Malaysia to journey towards the next century.
Exactly. I think you make a great point for already starting it. Don't wait until there is a demand for it. As the industry, you can create that demand. Right. So from there, gentlemen, now this one I think is one I'd like to get started off by asking Paul. How do you utilize technology in your approach to finding new solutions for customers or even operations? Now, often when it comes to particularly larger organizations in the corporate sector, is it a factor of looking at the tools and tech available as a starting point, or still leading with ideas and pain points, Paul?
I think certainly from a Maxis business standpoint, we focus very much around the customer and how do we ideate and co-create with the customer to better understand their business, to better understand the challenges and the pain points. But you also have to bring some structure, because it can't just be sort of free thinking. And that structure we bring to the table through what we call design thinking, which is a very structured, human-centric approach in terms of designing with a view to the customer experience, the customer outcome, the customer problem. And it's a 5-stage process that looks at empathy, define the problem, ideate around the problem, prototype, and then test and validate. And we find that using that methodology with our customers and in terms of how we build our products allows us to build much better customer-centric products, services, and experiences that help us differentiate from the market and our competition. Because our customers at the end of the day relish the fact that they can consume things in new ways. We have thought about problems that they may not even know that existed. And we tend to work with them, and we use technology at the end of it then to enable those experiences and solutions. So it's not technology driven, it's more customer centric with a strong process and then technology enabled.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for the reminder as well, Paul. Now, from there, I wanted to ask about inspiring employees to always innovate and having a mindset guided by endless possibilities. Much more of a leadership question. Dr. Sulaiman, if I could get your thoughts on this.
I've always believed, Tamina, as we discussed just now, that interaction is key, and to me, I think challenging ideas and debating, I think, is key. Is our culture that I always want to have, because sometimes I think maybe it's the Asian culture. We don't like people to question stuff. We don't like people to debate about things. But I think in the organization, at least in MBank, we want to encourage people to challenge things. And I know that, so long as you draw the line and say it's nothing personal, it's really about, getting the best ideas out there for the customers. I think that's important. So you draw a safe line and say the intention is to make sure that we remain relevant to the topic and to ensure that, we really want to work for the customers at the end of the day. Hence, I think people feel safe. And it's not about, pointing faults. It's really about, to make sure that we focus on an idea and it's robust enough to be able to go out, and people must accept that. And it requires a bit of change, because sometimes, we have face that we want to jaga or protect, and we don't want to get into this confrontational kind of behavior. But I really believe that, if you interact more and you confront ideas and you really think deep and hard enough, you can really be innovative. It's back to the culture that you want to have. And the bosses has got to be very comfortable with this. It's okay if the idea doesn't come from the big boss, if it comes from someone else. It doesn't mean that just because you work longer, you know most, It's always about the customers out there and how well you know them, and people needs to be challenged. And when people are challenged and they go the most, pressurized environment, sometimes the best ideas, come up from there and robust enough to withstand, challenges. So I think I go back to this issue of what kind of organization that you want to have, because you can't say that I just want innovation. Everybody has to be innovative from today, and all the juices flow. It doesn't work that way. I suppose
there's no turn on button.
Yes.
Absolutely. So from there, I've got one last question, which I'd actually like to get Shairan's thoughts on. Now, when we speak about acceleration of tech and so much of innovation that's been happening, particularly over the last year, what about the fear, Shairan, that some may be left behind? And how do we start looking at moving entire sectors as a whole, particularly when it comes to innovation?
So I want to touch two things, which is firstly, FOMO. You want to do something because somebody else is doing it, which is okay, but not necessarily the right motivation for you to do it. So I always go with what I say, customers come first. They really want in Malaysia to move, and let people move in the way that makes sense for them, whether for public transport, and that sounds like a blasphemy coming from Shell.
But fair enough, that's talking about real innovation, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And if you go to Station Abdullah Hukum now, we have a Shell station selling no fuel, kopi kau, mee goreng, mihun goreng, and
go there.
Please do. Right? Because people need to move, and we want people to move in a sustainable way. So I'm really proud of my team embracing it. We don't quite know how to, but we'll discover it. And that's the second thing. It is, I agree with Datuk Sulaiman, it comes from the ground, innovation, not from him, I, or even Paul. Yeah? And I know Paul is slightly smarter than both of us combined, but it's really allowing the team to innovate and the space to fail. And this one, leaders are not naturally that. I give you an example. I actually was delighted my team come up with a completely manless, completely cashless, fully automated kiosk selling all the beverages and snacks in Jalan Tun Razak opposite IJN.
Right.
And the tech worked like a marvel, right? Everything runs like clockwork, but it failed. And we then stopped the experiment, and it was okay for me. And the team was waiting to be blasted, right? But they didn't. We learned from that. And it's an idea that was ahead of its time. I think that's the key behind innovation. Learn fast, fail fast, move on, try again.
Fantastic, really brilliant summation of that. And gentlemen, as we come to the close of this discussion, we could go on, but honestly, it's just time that constrains us. Paul, what were your biggest takeaways from this short but really intense discussion that we had on technology and innovation for the corporate sector?
Look, I think innovation is a culture that you want to foster within the organization. And certainly putting the customer at the center of everything you do and giving people a safe environment to create new ideas and to challenge the status quo is absolutely critical. And I guess we're very fortunate in dealing with organizations that are thought leaders like Ambank and Shell, who are really sort of changing their industries. And we feel that we're a great partner to help them do that. So it really is about culture, it's about enablement, and it's about creating safe environments and encouraging people to think ahead and to focus on the customer, and in our case, to always be ahead. Absolutely.
Thank you for that, Paul. And Dr. Sulaiman, what is the one key takeaway that you hope those from the corporate sector listening into us today will take away and actually implement when it comes to their day-to-day life in the business cycle?
I honestly think we cannot underestimate the power of people. People drives technology, and technology certainly support people. And because of that, I think harness the power of your team, I think is very, very important. And it's not just about building the team. It's really about how to make the best out of everyone, of your team members. The other thing I want to add on, I think at least for banks, I would say that, we can learn a lot from, Shell's got 10 million customers, and from Maxis has got 9 million customers. Yes. I think between the two of them, they got the entire almost population of Malaysia. Then the question is, bank needs to adjust and understand, at the end of the day, banking needs retailing, but you need to also understand the trust element that we need to have. Not that they don't have trust, Maxis and of course, Shell, but and more importantly is the way that, how customers are being served, how customers come regularly to their shops and use their services. What does it take to get there? And the worry is that if you're not relevant, to the customers, you will disappear. And you've seen this. And it happens time and again. And the great giants like Kodak, once upon a time, Blockbuster, history repeats itself. So always lessons learned, and you have to have it if you want to survive. It's no more just about something fancy that you have. It's about survival of the fittest.
Literally, quite literally, especially in the past year. Thanks, Dr. Sulaiman. And Shairan, before we end, what was the biggest point that stood out to you from this short discussion that we actually had today about technology and the intersection of innovation?
Firstly, thank you to the 10 million Malaysians who allow me to serve you. And for the other 10 millions, please, I would be grateful to be able to do that. As far as innovation is concerned, you guys, Malaysians, are at the heart of what we do at Shell. That's what we wake up every morning for. And for the leaders out there, empower your team. They know more than we ever will. And digital is only, I mean that in the most respectful manner, the enabler. And last word is about collaboration. Shell can't do it alone. Maxis can't do it alone. Ambank can't do it alone. But imagine the power of collaboration across sector. I think there's something magical waiting to happen in Malaysia.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shairan. Thank you, panelists. Your insights and rich storytelling have really elevated our perspectives on pushing boundaries and leading in innovation, particularly through adopting digital solutions. One reminder to our participants, please do submit your feedback forms, which will automatically appear at the end of the session. This full video will also be delivered to your email after the event, so do keep an eye out for that. On that note, we've come to the end of today's Maxis Business Spark Engage Innovate to Accelerate virtual forum. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure taking you through this jam-packed session. I'm your host and moderator, Tamina Kausji, signing off. Till the next one, stay safe and stay healthy.